Baseball Tonight, the podcast.
This is the Baseball Tonight podcast for Thursday, March 2nd, 2017. I'm Buster Olney, and our esteemed producers, Josh Macri. And Josh, you and I had talked about getting David Ross on the podcast, a longtime catcher. He's now our colleague here at ESPN, and the word came back that, one day he was flying in the morning, he wasn't available, another day he was busy, and now we get it, right? We get the rest of the information. David Ross on Dancing with the Stars. I'm sure he's going to do great. What do you think?
Winner. That's my call right now. Winner.
Wow.
Yeah, David Ross won a couple World Series. Now he's going to add Dancing with the Stars champion to that resume. You heard it here first.
Yeah, well, and first off, he's so likable, right? I mean, how could the judges give him a bad grade because he's such a good person? It does raise the question, Josh, how would you do if you were on Dancing with the Stars?
I'd probably be the first one eliminated, but it would be very unfair, and I'd call conspiracy. Like David Ross, I have a beard. I don't have the salt and pepper action going as well as he does, so I think that would work to my disadvantage. But, I'd call BS on it because I think I have the talent to win. I just don't think the judges would be on my side.
You have the talent to win, right? You're going to beat these, world-class athletes? You would beat them?
Oh, absolutely. Because what I lack, what I lack in talent, I make up for in heart, as you well know, Buster.
Way to go. Well, you would do better than I would. They would, if I was ever invited on Dancing with Stars. Well, I'm never going to be invited on
never
Dancing with the Stars.
Never say never, Buster.
Right, exactly. But if they ever did that, then I would go there, they would hold a press conference, and then they would see me move, and they would go, never mind. We're sending it back. The last time I danced was the first dance at my wedding.
That was the last one.
Yeah, that was the last one. That was 21 years ago.
Wow.
So, no, it would be a disaster. All right, well, today we'll go rapid fire with Astros designated hitter Carlos Beltran. General Manager Ross Atkins of the Toronto Blue Jays will tell you what the team's plans are this year for Aaron Sanchez after wrestling with his innings limits last year. Joey Votto has a new goal in mind this spring. Jared Krasnick will tell you about that, and we'll talk with Ryan Divish of the Seattle Times about the new and improved Felix Hernandez. But first, some news and notes. Not surprisingly, Zach Greinke will pitch the season opener in 2017 for the Arizona Diamondbacks. The Pirates' Josh Bell, who's coming back from injury, has been cleared to run bases. He, of course, is expected to be part of the first base solution for Pittsburgh. Buster Posey was scratched from Wednesday's exhibition because of neck soreness. Jose Abreu testified that he ate his fake passport in a smuggling operation. I would encourage everyone to go and read that story on ESPN.com. It gives you a better explanation than I could give you here. Jarrett Parker is trying to win the Giants' left field job, Josh, and on Wednesday he had a really good day, starting with this.
And the pitch. Driven down the right field line. Fair ball off the bottom of the wall, and coming in to score will be Hill, and Parker slides into second with a double.
Yeah, Giants general manager Bobby Evans has said he wants one of the young players to win this job outright. Well, the good day continued for Jarrett Parker.
High drive. Right field. Gone. Younginer throws one pitch, and Parker circles the bases, and the Giants take the lead.
Dwayne Kuiper, Mike Krukow on CSN Bay Area. Dellin Betances made his first appearance of spring training. Here's the call from John Flaherty of the YES Network.
Really good first impression for Kurt Suzuki. And a nice first inning of the spring for Dellin Betances. That was his first strikeout. He did walk one. The Yankees still lead 4-0.
Rangers manager Jeff Bannister talked about the addition of Mike Napoli to their clubhouse.
I've seen an early intensity to prepare himself. I love yesterday watched him on a base pass. Just he was a back end runner, really working hard and set an example for a lot of guys on our team and some of the little small details that it takes to win baseball games. Yesterday, I think the barrel showed up on one of his at-bats, but just overall a solid presence inside of our clubhouse.
And everybody on Wednesday was talking about Theo Epstein, and not for the reasons you might think. Let's get to it.
The great state of Maine, famous for lobster and, well, at least Jerry Krasnick's from there. It's time for the Maine man, Jerry Krasnick, on Baseball Tonight.
And Jerry Krasnick covers baseball for ESPN. And Jerry, talk all around baseball on Wednesday about Theo Epstein stepping into a cage against Ryan Dempster. And what was happening was Dempster, preparing to pitch for Team Canada in the WBC, was throwing some batting practice. He asked some of the Cubs players to get in and take some hacks against him. Theo was standing there, so he put on a helmet, grabbed a bat, and he took a swing. The only swing that I actually saw video of, he hit a ball toward right field. I don't know if it went foul or not, but it wasn't a bad-looking swing. And our Jesse Rogers, Jerry, went from player to player in the Cubs clubhouse, Javier Baez, Chris Bryant, Anthony Rizzo, to ask them what they thought of Theo's swing.
Who's hitting?
It's Theo.
There's no chance Theo connects with anything.
What Demp looks like he's in mid-season form.
What?
There's no way that's a home run.
How's the swing look?
That's perfect. I love it. They both look like they've been playing.
You gotta be kidding me with this. Let me rewind this. That's not him. That's Theo. He's kind of got my follow-through. He's been watching me a lot.
It's a terrible swing.
Still got it. I mean, if we need him, he's there.
If it did go out, I think Canada might be in trouble, don't you?
No, I think they're in a good spot with Demp on the mound.
Yeah, so what we got was Anthony Rizzo said it was a terrible swing, but Bryant and Baez obviously a little bit surprised that Theo showed something with that swing, some athleticism. Jerry, look, he played high school ball. He stood up for all the nerds.
Yeah, I think Theo's got some athleticism in those, in his genes, and he also has some competitiveness. Dempster described it as a little like a flare to the opposite field, and Theo said, "Does this look like a flare?" He said it was only a double if Steve Balboni was playing right field. That being said, if you're a 43-year-old president of baseball operations and you can get in the box against the guy who pitched in the big leagues pretty recently and is going to face the Dominican Republic in the World Baseball Classic, and you can make that kind of contact, I thought it was a pretty impressive showing by Theo.
Now, I remember one time, Jerry, when I was covering the Yankees, Mike Messina asked me if I wanted to step in to face him when he was throwing, he was going through some kind of a bullpen session, and I immediately said no. And I said, look, I have full faith in your command, one of the great command pitchers of his era. But I said, if you throw a fastball up and in, I would start reacting after the ball landed on the ground, like if it hit me in the face. And so I didn't step in. I do think that if I got in against Dempster that I could make contact, but I certainly would not hit the ball as far as Theo did. What about you, Jerry? How would you do?
I was kind of small and undersized when I played as a kid, and, I'd go up there a lot of times looking for the walk, I think. But, look, I wouldn't mind getting in against one of these guys, but I remember Jamie Moyer once. I think it was Dan Patrick used to say, I could get a hit off Jamie Moyer. And Jamie Moyer said to me, he goes, no, he wouldn't, because I put the first pitch right under here, and he aimed at it, pointed at it where his chin was. And then after that, he would just be rendered ineffective, So I think these guys have enough control that they could bust you up and in, get you off the plate, and get inside your head, and then you'd have a problem.
Yeah, well, we're going to be speaking with Ross Atkins, the general manager of the Jays, coming up here, and I'm going to ask him who's the best hitter among baseball executives. He might be the best pitcher because he pitched 5 years in the minor leagues. So we'll pick up this conversation a little bit later in the podcast. You've got a story you've been working on about Joey Votto, the Reds' first baseman, who, let's face it, he's one of the veterans, last remaining veterans for a team that's going through the rebuilding/tanking process. Had a great season last year, an MVP candidate. But you mentioned to me in an email, he's trying to become more of a leader. Tell me what you learned.
Yeah, Buster, I talked to him. As you know, Joey Votto's a really interesting guy. You know, you ask him a question, and he just puts more thought into it, I think, than a lot of players. But he's also a guy who's been kind of a loner. You know, you look at him, he can be a little intimidating looking, and I think a lot of his younger teammates, Zach Cozart told me this, you know, over the years have been a little hesitant or maybe even afraid to approach him. And, you know, last year he took Billy Hamilton out into the cage early in the season, and they had these tutorials every single day, and it made a big difference for Billy Hamilton. And Joey said to me, he said, look, you know, early in my career, I was so into myself and my own preparation. I was trying to get established. He said, you know, I'm not going to be taking guys out to dinner or that sort of thing, but I'm sharing my workspace. You know, if I'm working out and hitting, I'll invite another guy into the cage and exchange ideas and share information. And, you know, he wants to be a better teammate and more of a mentor. And I think that's admirable. You know, obviously he's making a lot of money. He's, in that respect, maybe miscast being in Cincinnati, which is cutting back and going young. But for him to have that kind of attitude, I think, really bodes well for that team because he's not going to be a problem. On the contrary, he's probably going to be a benefactor and a mentor to some of these young kids.
Yeah, and I think it's smart for Joey to do that because all we hear is that, and he said this, he likes playing in Cincinnati. He has a full no-trade clause. On paper, it would make sense for the Reds to probably move him, to move some of the salary, to make him part of the rebuilding process and trade him. But it doesn't seem like that's going to happen. So if Joey's going to stay there in Cincinnati where he loves to play, hey, why not try to make the guys around you better?
Yeah, look, he's signed through 2023. So, you know, what he said is, look, if the rebuilding process maybe moves a little faster than we think, you know, there's still a point in the contract where he's going to be there. And hopefully, you know, if it's 2 or 3 years, 2020, I mean, he'll be around 36. So, you know, maybe not the greatest situation, but if he's still productive, you know, maybe they could mesh a little bit and some of the young kids grow and he gets better and, you know, he gets a chance to contend in Cincinnati. It's certainly not going to happen, you know, this year or next year. I mean, they have no pitching and they're in a really tough division. But, you know, it is something where I think both sides are making the best of what could be a difficult situation.
Yeah, and you mentioned Billy Hamilton. To me, he's one of the guys in baseball who I can't wait to see this year because of the improvement he made during the course of last season. You mentioned his conversations with Joey Votto. In his last 45 games, and he got hurt in that end of his season prematurely, but in the second half, his last 45 games, he hit .293, .369 on base percentage, .703 OPS, and let's face it, if Billy Hamilton gets on base at a .369 on base percentage, he might steal 120 bases, Jerry.
Yeah. Look, I've always thought if he gets on base at a .320 base, you know, on base percentage and is like a Juan Pierre type of guy, that guy's a massive weapon. I mean, if he gets on base, at a .360 clip, he might steal 150 bases. So, you know, if his body can hold up. So, Joey's really helped him. You know, even his exit velocity and some of the other supporting metrics have really showed some improvement. And, you know, to have a guy like Joey Votto in the cage working with you on approach and you know, that sort of thing, it's really just made a huge difference to this kid.
You saw the Colorado Rockies when you were out in Arizona. I've talked to scouts with other teams who say there's a lot of optimism about this team. John Gray apparently looks tremendous, one of their young starting pitchers, a guy who was drafted the same year as Chris Bryant was drafted. Tell me what you saw and heard about the Rockies.
Well, look, I went out there to talk to Bud Black, and as you remember, Buster, you know, when he was in San Diego and he came in there, what did he hear? It was a lot about position players complaining about how bad the park was. You know, so Phil Nevin and Ryan Klesko were gone, but he was still there when, you know, there were guys like Adrian Gonzalez and Mike Cameron and Brian Giles and a lot of these veterans, and they'd hit rockets to the fence and balls would die at the track. And Bud Black was like, look, I had to sort of talk these guys through it and say, just worry about hitting the ball hard and hit it on a line and that sort of thing. He had to kind of calm the apprehensions of the hitters. Well, now he's got to do the same for the pitchers, and this is pretty familiar turf for him. I mean, I think the guy is excellent, obviously, with a pitching staff. He's got two really good coaches in Steve Foster and Darren Holmes. And, you know, the Rockies, it's going to come down. They got this veteran bullpen, but it's going to come down to the starting pitching with, as you mentioned, John Gray, Chad Bettis, Tyler Chatwood, Tyler Anderson, the young kid. It's a young staff, but they pitched well at Coors Field last year, these kids, and they appear to be mentally tough. And look, if they get some pitching with that lineup, maybe they can make a little bit of noise.
Speaking of the Padres, one of the most interesting moments in spring training on Wednesday, Christian Bethancourt, the longtime catcher, he played with the Braves, he got traded over to the Padres. He is trying pitching this spring, and I got to tell you, Jerry, when I saw the video of him on the mound yesterday, which came from Dennis Lynn of the San Diego Union Tribune. You can find it on Twitter. He looked tremendous. Like, it was clear, look, his mechanics are not perfectly smooth, but when you watched it, you're like, okay, that kid threw a lot of wiffle ball. He pitched a lot. Like, that's not something foreign to him, and his fastball was popping. And I exchanged emails last night with Andy Green, the Padres manager, and he talked about, hey, he did really well for his first appearance, and it'll be fun at some point. Andy's going to make that unusual change, Jerry, of being able to take a pitcher out and double switch isn't the right way to describe it, and move him to catcher probably later in the game. This is something we'll see during the 2017 season.
Jayson Stark, just like, you know, that's his dream come to life, you know. I think but yeah, I watched that clip too, and you're right. I mean, his mechanics probably aren't that smooth, but look, Matt Bush turned out to be pretty good, and if a kid's going to be a reliever, he doesn't have to be quite as refined. And this is a guy who always had an amazing arm. You know, as a catcher, they always said great pop times. He could throw people out. He just really hasn't been able to hit much, and so he's been a disappointment. But, hey, Trevor Hoffman was a shortstop who went to pitcher, and he turned out to be pretty good. So, look, I think that's a sort of a function of smart scouts and people who have a little imagination and say, hey, if this kid isn't clicking at a certain position, let's try him somewhere else. And hopefully he'll succeed, because that's going to be a heck of a fun story to follow.
If you did spring training power rankings, and God hopes that no one actually does that, that would not be something that would get a lot of attention, because spring training results generally don't mean anything. The Yankees would be number one. They are 6-1 in games, and the record doesn't mean anything. But within their games, it's like every guy in their camp who might have come into camp with some questions, you know, how is this guy going to do? Greg Bird, 2 doubles, 2 home runs. Dylan Betances, first outing last night, he looked great. Jacoby Ellsbury's throwing out hits. Clint Frazier, who they got in the Indians trade, he looks great. How much stock do you put in these type of results, Jerry, when a team has good answers going on like the Yankees have right now?
Well, look, Buster, it's better than the alternative. On the other hand, I'm not going to get overly excited over 7 games. I do think if Ellsbury and Gardner, say, are healthy, that's 2 speedy guys who really give you some defense, you know, a lot of things they can offer, so that's good. Greg Bird is certainly a kid with ability, but he's always been hurt. Aaron Judge is off to a pretty good start. You know, I'm not 100% sold on him. I mean, he's a big kid who has to cut down on some holes in his swing. The pitching is hanging by a thread a little bit, you know, with the starters, I think. So, you know, we'll see how they hold up. But, look, it is good to get off to a good start. It's just that it's such a long season, and, you know, Sabathia and Tanaka and Pineda and all their starters, these guys have to stay healthy and productive. And, you know, 1 week of spring training, while positive, they still have an awful long way to go.
Jerry, great to talk with you, and thanks for doing this.
Thanks a lot.
In just a minute, we'll go rapid fire with Astros designated hitter Carlos Beltran. But first, all this month, we're asking you to tell a friend about a podcast they'll love. Right now, think of a friend, your mom, dad, husband, wife, anyone you care about. What podcast would they really love? Got it? Now do it. Tell them about it in real life or on social media. And if they don't know about podcasts, show them how. tell us what you recommended with a hashtag tripod, TRY pod. Thanks for spreading the word. Josh, a podcast you love?
Baseball Tonight with Buster Olney. How about that one?
Yeah, there was only one right answer. If you had messed that one up, I would have never called you the esteemed producer again.
I know where my bread is buttered.
Over the last couple weeks, Baseball Tonight has gone camp to talk with players and go rapid fire in interviews. Here was our sit-down with Carlos Beltran.
Favorite movie?
John Q.
Celebrity crush?
My wife.
Walk-up song?
Salsa music.
Favorite player growing up?
Bernie Williams.
If you weren't a baseball player, you would be?
Bat.
Number of tattoos?
None.
Favorite emoji?
Happy face.
What's it like to face Clayton Kershaw?
It's one of the best in the game. He's a guy that there's no doubt has a great fastball, great curveball, good slider. So in the time that I was in the National League, I got the opportunity to face him many, many times, and it's a tough at bat.
What are your own personal rules for doing social media?
Honestly, I'm very boring in social media. For the most part, I really post a lot of things related to my family. I know fans, really love to know what you do off the field and, in the field with the guys. But I'm very boring with those social media. I need to get better with that.
Who would you rank as the top player at your position?
What position I play? I don't even know what.
You tell me what position. What do you consider yourself to be?
Well, outfield.
Okay.
I would say the best player in my position's got to be Mike Trout.
How did you get linked to baseball the first time?
I think my dad. My dad and my mom. When I was a kid, the first gift that I received was a baseball bat, and my dad always played baseball. When he grew up in Puerto Rico, and my brother also. So we basically baseball is in the blood. In our family. So I was fortunate to be around baseball for such a long time, and also to get the opportunity to play professional baseball and be at the big leagues for the amount of years that I've been in the big leagues.
If you're trying to convince a little kid to try to play baseball, what would you tell them?
Well, you know what? It's a fun game, honestly. When you get to the ballpark and you get the opportunity to swing the bat and do something for your team and try to help the team win ball games. You could do it offensively, you could do it defensively, you could do it in the base path. So you don't really have to be the most talented to help a team win. And it's a collective game. You have to basically. You cannot depend on only one guy to win a ball game. Everyone have to be part of it. So I think it's a good team game.
Tell me what it's like to be brought in to be a mentor.
Well, for me, it's great. I think, I have done this all my life, as a ball player. So now that I'm getting older, it's been noticed more. But I have passion to help. I have learned a lot in this game. I have gone through ups and downs and all type of situations, and I think it could be beneficial for some of the younger guys that are here in this ball club. So the fact that I have gone through a lot, I can relate to them, and when they're going through difficult situations, I can encourage them and be a support guy for them, and hopefully, but also most importantly, I'm here to perform.
Tell me about your relationship with Carlos Correa. Both coming from Puerto Rico. When's the first time you met him? What are your impressions of him?
Well, when I first time met him, it was when he signed. I remember I was with the Cardinals, and he went to Houston, and he was a first-round pick. Big deal in Puerto Rico, and great talented guy. Now having the opportunity to play with him. Playing in Texas last year a little bit. I got the opportunity to watch him closely, and he's super talented. There's no doubt that he's capable of doing so many good things in this game. I just want to hope in health that, hopefully he can stay healthy for a long time and can be able to go out there and make good things happen, and also bring a lot of joy to our country, Puerto Rico.
You've reached a stage in your career where you're approaching a bunch of big numbers. Tell me a number that would be meaningful to you.
The numbers that I really like the most are RBIs and run score. Because an RBI means that you help the team score a run, and a run score means also that you're producing for the team. So those are the numbers that I really care.
3,000 hits?
3,000 hit would be great. I don't know how far I am, honestly. But I probably got to play 2 more years to get to that. So I don't know if I see myself, coming to spring training and doing all this grind and doing all this work. But we'll see. If this year, with the help of God, I stay healthy and I'm capable of contribute the way I did last year. And I believe it's going to happen because the guys that I have in front of me. Me hitting the middle of the lineup with Altuve and Bregman and Correa. I mean, that's a dream come true for the middle of the lineup guys. So I will say that maybe I have 1 more year left.
What's the funniest thing someone has said to you about being an older player and made jokes with you in camp since you've been here?
Honestly, no one really make joke with me. They really respect me. I'm very serious for the most part. So I guess my face don't allow them to have jokes with me. But probably later on during the season, when they start getting a little bit more confident, that probably I would get some of those jokes.
Why do you think 2017 Astros can get to where the 2004 Astros didn't get to?
Well, you know what? When you look around the clubhouse, you see talent all over the place. Every position, and I believe that every team in baseball have a window where those players are together, and those players now they have the 3 years in the big leagues. It's a time where they know what they're capable of doing, and I think the organization have done a pretty good job, developing these players to the position where they are right now. When I look every position, I look at Bregman at third, Altuve second, Correa shortstop, Springer in right field, Reddick. I mean, so it's like guys are in their peak. So I believe that if we stay healthy and we're able to create an atmosphere in the clubhouse where allows to go out there to the field day in and day out and perform, we're going to be fine, even though our division is very tough.
You wrote in your Players Tribune article that Altuve asked you how he can get better. What did you say to him?
Oh my God, man! I said, brother, I don't. Where you need to get better at? And he said, well, you know what? I didn't hit curveballs well last year, so I got to get better at that. So I'm a guy that has spent a lot of time in the cage. I like to work in curveballs, and basically every day when you face whoever I'm facing, I try to simulate that guy in the cage with the curveball machine, whoever the breaking pitch is. Could be a curveball, slider. I try to make it similar to the guy that I'm facing and go out there and prepare myself. So I will tell him that I want to make him be part of that routine, and hopefully that routine could help him to have success in the field.
Ross Atkins is the general manager of the Toronto Blue Jays. And Ross, before we get to some of the issues with the Blue Jays, I'm assuming that you've seen videotape of Theo Epstein taking batting practice against Ryan Dempster. First, give us the pure scouting evaluation of Theo's swing.
I was taken back. It looked like there wasn't a ton of effort. Definitely had some athleticism to it, good extension. Most impressive was the contact, used the opposite field. Definitely not what I expected.
Well, and that led me into a train of thought, of course, that sports writers have, where you start to rank things all the time. So among your peers who are front office executives with all teams, who would you guess might be the best hitter among the executives, and who might be the best pitcher? And you would be a candidate in that because you had 5 seasons in the minor leagues.
Yeah, I'd say Jerry probably wins both of those, unless I'm forgetting somebody. Jerry
Dipoto, general manager of the Mariners.
Yeah. I mean, I tell you what, I don't belong in that ranking. My swing wouldn't be nearly as good as Theo's was.
Yeah, I'm curious, the conversation between Jed Hoyer, who played at Wesleyan, and Theo after Theo got all the publicity for that a few swings in the cage.
It's good to see. It's good to see guys having fun, not taking themselves too seriously, and as much of a I don't like the word grind, but as much of a competition and the intensity of these jobs. So from time to time to see someone having some fun and enjoying themselves is somewhat refreshing.
Absolutely. Well, you guys this year will not have to deal with innings questions around Aaron Sanchez the way that you did last year. Before I ask you what your plans are for him this year, what was your takeaway from last year? What did you learn about that whole process based on the fact that you guys were sort of making decisions as the summer went along?
Yeah, it was a great year for Aaron Sanchez, first and foremost, to look up and think that we have one of the best young controllable starters, where a year ago he could have been going into our bullpen at this point. The work that he put in, the consistency of his year, just it only got better and better as the year went on. The intensity of his work, how smart he was with his work, and obviously the performance speaks for itself. But the best part about outside of what Aaron accomplished, and outside of obviously that he deserves all the credit, but one of the things that was great for us as an organization was it took a team. It took people from player development, people from professional scouting, amateur scouting, people from obviously the major league staff and high performance, our medical staff, working together. And whether that was just communication or insight or building a plan and coming up with the best information to help us make a decision at each threshold, really brought a lot of people together. And that was, something we can now look back to as a decent process moving forward, whether it be a starting pitcher or just trying to help a young player get better. But, one of the things that, the biggest thing we learned was, how professional and committed Aaron Sanchez is. We certainly didn't doubt it, but he just went to levels that are atypical. And, it's not necessarily one thing. Our philosophy is that you got to treat individuals as such, and we individualize the plan based on all of the information and not just innings, not just pitches thrown, but recovery, fatigue, or lack thereof, and all of the objective and subjective measurements kept telling us that we could continue to have him pitch. And the communication was there, but man, it really is a testament to how hard he worked, and how committed he was last year.
You wound up throwing about 204 innings between the regular season and the postseason. Coming into this year, where are you with the innings conversation around him?
It's interesting because obviously you have to pay attention to him. You look at history, you look at his track record, and it's just one piece of the equation. So it will be certainly not even one of the bigger pieces of the equation. The biggest piece of the equation is recovery, how he's feeling, and not just subjectively, but range of motion, strength, where fatigue is and isn't. So, we will work through an innings goal for him as something just to have as a benchmark, but it really won't be something that ends up driving the decision.
A lot of the conversation around your team, as you know, Ross, this winter has been about the lineup and concerns about Edwin Encarnacion moving on and where would the offense come from. I almost feel like that you guys have been underrated during this winter because, and what's overlooked is the depth of your rotation, which I think could arguably be the best in the American League. Where do you see your rotation now?
Yeah, we're excited about it. The fact that where Francisco Liriano was at the end of last year, he was more than effective. He was incredible for us down the stretch. So, having him, whether he's our third, fourth, fifth starter, that's the beauty of it, is we don't feel like we feel like anybody of those guys could potentially start on opening day, and any of those guys, we would want to have on the mound for a playoff game. So, it's the experiences, the stuff, the the track record of a few and the upside of some others is really exciting to think about, because we still feel like in a couple of the younger guys there's some upside. We still feel as though Marco Estrada could be even better than he was. So I think the one thing that I probably talk about too much, and it's fine, I'm comfortable going to it, is how much Russ Martin means to those guys and the job he's done to help them along.
What an unusual journey for Jose Bautista last year. In spring training, there's talk about what he'd be looking for in his next contract. I know at the end of the regular season, at the end of when you were eliminated in the postseason, there was an expectation that he probably would be moving on. He comes back to you this spring. Tell me about the conversations that you guys have had with him since he got back in camp, and what have you seen?
He's been awesome. He has really been awesome. He is, it's like he never left. So it's not, it doesn't feel as though it was anything other than negotiating a salary. He's extremely motivated. He's extremely upbeat. He's, obviously interacting very well with all these guys. The only guys he doesn't know as well are the ones that weren't here last year. So, he's a guy that, I think there's not a guy on this team that isn't absolutely elated that he's back, and potentially whether he's in our 4-hole, 2-hole, 5-hole, 6-hole, wherever it's going to be. I mean, we feel like we have some really good options there. So, excited to have him as our everyday right fielder too. I think he worked really hard this offseason after a setback in 2015 with his shoulder that he never really truly recovered from last year, and then had a couple of nagging injuries last year that that were unfortunate, and he's put himself in a good position. He looks great. He's moving around great, and like I said, I mean, it's just it's a good thing to see him back here.
What's the status of Josh Donaldson, who had some calf problems early in camp?
Yeah, he feels great. I think, we're fortunate that it is early in camp and we can be conservative, and extremely optimistic that he's going to have plenty of bats and not just be ready to go for the season, but, really to have a solid spring training.
Last one before you go. In the early games in camp and what you've seen with the work, has any young player jumped out at you?
Yeah, we've had a lot of guys that spent a lot of time here this offseason working out with our high-performance team, with the strength coaches, with our medical staff, that, there's a lot of guys that have just hit the ground running, Rowdy Tellez, Richie Arena, Anthony Alford, Reese McGuire. They've looked incredible in camp, and some of our young arms and Casey Lawrence and Timmy Meza have really jumped out at us, here early in camp. But it's not one guy, it's not two guys, it's the guys that spent a ton of time here, and didn't mention Chris Smith and Matt Dermody, guys that maybe aren't as big of a name that we are extremely excited about helping this team.
Hey Ross, thanks for taking the time to do this.
Yeah, anytime, Buster. Thanks for having me on, man.
It's time for some Inside Heat on Baseball Tonight.
Ryan Devers covers the Seattle Mariners for the Seattle Times. And Ryan, I'm sure that you've seen the over-unders that have come out of some of the casinos about the Mariners and all other teams. And the Mariners, to me, had one of the more interesting ones from the Westgate Casino, 85.5. And to put that into context, last year they won 86 games, and during the offseason, they made some moves clearly designed to try to help them in 2017, adding Gene Segura, improving their outfield defense. 85.5, and I understand that the American League West is going to be competitive, still feels light to me. That my first reaction when I saw it. What'd you think?
Yeah, I was a little surprised. They won 86 last year, and I didn't think they played particularly well for the large stretches of the season. So when I saw 85.5, I was kind of curious. I mean, I really kind of putting them about maybe 88 wins. That's my initial thoughts. Now that could change once the season gets going. But, you look at the upgrades to their lineup, to their team defense, which was abysmal last year, and even some of the upgrades to the pitching staff. I know some people were I have some concerns about Giovanni Gallardo and Felix Hernandez as well, but I still think they're a better team on paper right now than they were when the season ended last year.
Yeah, and you mentioned what might be the soft underbelly, the Achilles heel of what the Mariners are going to be this year, the starting pitching. Look, to me, the biggest factor is going to be, can Felix Hernandez come close to being what he's been in the past, or is this someone who took a step back last year, took a step down, and is not going to come back because he's thrown so many innings? I know he pitched for the Mariners on Tuesday. How did he look in that first outing?
He looked better than I think he did usually about this time of year. He's on a faster track to get ready because of the World Baseball Classic. He was throwing 92. He hit 92, sat at 91 with his fastball. I think that's a little better than what he usually is this time of year. I think the big thing with him is he's not going to be the same pitcher in terms of how he goes about his business that he was a few years ago. I think teams have figured him out a little bit more. He's lacked fastball command the last 2 years. We saw injuries start to become an issue. And this season he made a really conscientious effort to get in better shape. The Mariners challenged him publicly, something they've never done, but Jerry Dipoto, Scott Service, and Mel Stottlemyre Jr. all kind of made comments that he needed to make more of a focus on getting stronger in the offseason and how he does his preparation. And he came in a lot stronger. It's just a matter now of whether he adjusts. If you look at some of the data and stuff, and the Mariners have pointed this, that teams just look him down in the zone, meaning that if anything that starts out of his hand that looks like it could be in the lower part of the strike zone, they just lay off because they know it's usually the changeup or the sinker. And what they've done is they've laid off that pitch, the low and away pitch, so much that he falls behind in counts, and then that forces him back into the strike zone, and he gets hit hard. He had the highest walk percentage of his career last year. He gave up more hits than he's typically known to do. I think he's got to adjust not only physically but from a mindset of how he goes and attacks hitters.
Ryan, when you first saw him when he arrived in camp, what was your thought when you laid eyes on him in terms of how he looked?
He looked heavier and in a good way. Like the weight was reapportioned on his body. Nelson Cruz joked that he actually had muscles for the first time, and he does. He looks bigger in the legs and kind of rear end, and he has some muscle on his upper body. You can tell he put in some time. I think this is very serious. With Felix, the idea of being King Felix, that's just as big to him as anything. And looking vulnerable the last year and having people question his ability, I think really motivated him. It's just going to be a matter now of whether or not he has the command. I think he can get outs with the command if he has proper command because the secondary stuff is so good. And if you go back and look at some of his better years, even 2 years ago, his fastball's only averaged about 92 miles an hour. So he doesn't have to be the 95-mile-per-hour guy to be successful. He just needs to place 92 where it's supposed to, and that's what he couldn't do the last couple of years.
What do you make of the rest of the rotation?
If you look at the rotation, there are question marks at every guy. I mean, you have Felix Hernandez and everything looming over him. Masashi Iwakuma is even older than Felix, thrown just as many innings, and he's coming off a year where I think he exceeded expectations. Can he repeat that, or is he going to regress? James Paxton is a guy that's very, very talented, but every year it seems as though the Mariners have kind of said, okay, this is the year that James Paxton is going to put it all together. He's never done that. He's finally had a full season where he was healthy. Now he needs to get the results. Drew Smyly coming off a career high in starts, but he also gave up a ton of home runs, had an ERA over 4.5. And then Giovanni Gallardo is a guy that was, just abysmal last year at times. The velocity was way down. He had trouble with his shoulder. So now they're looking at him as a bounce-back candidate. So you can look at their first five guys and say, there's no sure thing given for any of them. And that's going to loom large over them the entire season.
They do now have a sure thing at shortstop, having acquired Jean Segura. He's had such an interesting career path, starting out very well with the Milwaukee Brewers, having some down years, some personal tragedy. Last year, a tremendous season with the Diamondbacks. The Diamondbacks clearly had questions about whether or not he would continue going. They treated him like a hot stock. They move him on to the Mariners. And I think I read one of your pieces over the winter about how excited he is to play with Robinson Cano this season.
Yeah, this is a big deal for Jean Segura. He credits all the success last season to spending the prior offseason working out with Robinson Cano and some of the swing changes he made, lowering his hands a little bit to start his stance where he's able to hit the ball harder to right field and cover the zone more. This off season, he basically lived with Cano during the week. The distance between their two places is about 2 hours, and so instead of driving to Cano's place every day to work out, Segura would stay with him 5 days a week, work out every day, and then go home on the weekends to be with his family. That's how serious he was about working with Cano. If you watch them within practice, they're around each other at all times. They follow each other everywhere they go. I think the Mariners believe that's going to be huge for Segura, just having Cano there as a calming presence. I think Cano's really stepped forward as a leader, something he wasn't in the past. But last year, Scott Service really challenged him to be more vocal, and he was. I think this year you're seeing it even more. So, I mean, they believe that the idea of having Cano and Segura working out every day in the offseason gives them a jump start on spring this year, especially with Segura going back to shortstop on a full-time basis.
Because the Mariners are focused on winning in 2017, I was a little bit surprised that as the winter played out with this absolute glut of options at first base, so many unsigned guys late in the winter, I thought at some point the Mariners might jump in and say, you know what, we're going to sign Mike Napoli, or we're going to be the team that jumps on Chris Carter at $3.5 million, or whatever it was. But in the end, they take a secondary option, Danny Valencia, who's really good against left-handed pitching, and Dan Vogelbach, who they acquired in a trade with the Cubs last year. I know from talking with Jerry DiPoto, they really want to give him that opportunity to play first base. What do you see in that, Tandem? Do you agree with me in terms of whether or not they would go into the market and grab one of these guys?
Yeah, I thought they would too. I thought they would go out and get two established first basemen, like maybe look at Mitch Moreland and then go with the Danny Valencia option as well. I know they liked Valencia because he could play the outfield and he gave him some more right-handed options and maybe give Kyle Seager a day off here or there. But, there were guys, and they were in on Napoli early. They just weren't willing to go multiple years for Napoli. I think maybe if they waited it out, they might have gotten something more along their likings. But at the same time, they didn't want to be kind of left hanging out there and not have the option of that. So they went for Valencia. Vogelbach is interesting. He isn't what you look like. I mean, if you look at him, he doesn't strike you as this guy that's going to be a great first baseman or even a great hitter. He's kind of got an odd build, and, he's not just overwhelming when he takes BP or anything, but they believe that he can hit. Now, this is going to be a big test because they're asking him to be a part of a team that's got expectations early. How is he going to handle it? How is he going to handle it this spring? They've asked a lot of him defensively because that's a really major weakness for him. And then just asking him to be just kind of decent. They're not asking him to be Mark Grace over there or John Orler. They just want him to be, average. And he's looked okay so far, but that's something you're going to have to watch. If Vogelbach struggles this spring, will they make a move? What will they decide? Will they go with Valencia as an everyday guy? They think he can hit right-handers a little bit, but it was curious, and I know a lot of the fans were upset that it felt like the Mariners should have dressed first base and should have dressed right field. Instead, they're going with two rookies, and Mitch Haniger and Dan Vogelbach as everyday type of guys, and what that's going to lead to. Now, if they work, great, but if not, do they have enough pitching to withstand two guys in the lineup that aren't producing?
We got 30 seconds left. A focus for the Mariners in the offseason was to upgrade their outfield defense. You mentioned Haniger. Have you seen these guys run around together, Leonis Martin, Gerard Dyson?
Yeah, we've seen them out there a little bit together. It's quite different than what it was. I mean, 2 years ago, Buster, they had games where they would start Mark Trumbull in left field, Austin Jackson in center, and Nelson Cruz in right, or Franklin Gutierrez in right. It just was bad. And this year they've tracked down balls. It just looks different. And you can just tell that the pitchers, there isn't that, oh no, when a ball goes up in there. They believe that it's going to be caught. And I think, we haven't really even seen it. This is Arizona where the ball carries and there's smaller parks. Wait till they get to Safeco Field or even Anaheim or Oakland during the season. I think that's where we'll really see the difference in the outfield defense.
Hey, Ryan, thanks for doing this. Great to talk with you.
Thank you.
Bleacher Tweets.
Buster, first one today comes from Nolan Scad, at Nolan Scad. He says, Buster, do you think the Mariners, who we were just talking about, have what it takes to grab a wild card spot after just missing out last season?
Yeah, absolutely they could. I think they could win the wild card. I also think they could win the American League West, but I haven't locked in my picks yet. They'll definitely, to me, they'll be in the mix.
Nobody's pressuring you to get those in quite yet, Buster. Next one from Chris Seth. he of two first names, at CSeth27. And Chris says, with less power in the lineup this year, is there any chance Girardi lets Gardner and Ellsbury run more?
I don't know about the less power thing, because you're going to have Gary Sanchez this year. Greg Bird, wow. I mean, he's having a great spring training for the Yankees. The rest of that lineup, I actually think, going to hit for more power. I think that whatever Ellsbury and Gardner could contribute, Girardi would take it, because let's face it, you're talking about two players on the back ends of their careers.
Next one from Ty Tesher, at Ty Tesher08. Should the Royals be having a fire sale like the White Sox? Fans are more forgiving after winning a recent World Series, Buster.
Yeah, I would agree with the premise that fans are more forgiving, but with the group of players they have, I think it's right for them to at least start 2017 trying to win. And if it goes badly in the first half and Cleveland or some other team, maybe the Tigers starts to run away, then I do think you're going to see a big midseason fire sale from the Royals.
A loyal Bleacher tweeter, Christopher Shields, at Christy_Shields, says, Chris Bryant won Rookie of the Year and MVP in his first two seasons. Should Major League Baseball create a new award just for Bryant this season?
Christopher? No.
And if so, it should be the Dustin Pedroia Award, because he did the same thing a few years back.
Whatever. I knew it. It always circles back to the Red Sox.
Of course it
and
does.
Pedroia.
Of course it does. Next one, Gary Salami, at Dr. Gary Salami. He's a doctor, damn it. And he says, Buster, should we expect Encarnacion to regress in a division with more pitcher-friendly ballparks?
Gary must be a fantasy player. That is a great observation. I do think his numbers will go down. I think he'll be good. He'll have a lot of really good hitters around him. I think he'll drive in a ton of runs. But you're right, the ballparks in the American League Central, maybe we'll see fewer home runs.
One more day to get those Bleacher Tweets in this week. Use the hashtag Bleacher Tweets.
One last thing.
As we've been talking about, David Ross is doing Dancing with the Stars. And on Wednesday, after the news broke, some of his teammates were talking with the reporters about this, most notably Anthony Rizzo.
So winning the World Series Saturday night, now he's on Dance with the Stars.
Does he have a standard move?
He's got like the little hip thrust thing with his arms, but it's exciting. I'm happy for him.
Yeah.
The way it unfolded was pretty funny, and I think he has a good chance of winning.
Okay. Any pointers?
Yeah, don't suck.
I've heard that before.
Yeah, it's just his words of wisdom. So, but I think he's a perfect candidate for that show, and it'll be fun to watch him on.
You guys are on the road. You get in someone's room and watch it together or something like that. Have some fun.
Oh yeah, and we got to get the whole Cubs family behind and vote for him. I know they're very good at voting, so, but he's got some tough competition on there.
Yeah, Josh, that's going to be an X factor in the competition. David Ross having Cubs Nation behind him.
Yeah, he's going to win, Buster. Simple as that.
You called it here first.
That's
okay.
right.
Well, that's it for today. My thanks to Ross Atkins, to Carlos Beltran, to Ryan Divish, Jerry Krasnick, and to Josh Macri, who produced this podcast every single day. Have a great day, everybody, and thanks for listening.
Thanks for listening to the Baseball Tonight podcast. If you're playing fantasy baseball, don't forget to listen to the Fantasy Focus podcast. Check out all podcasts at ESPN.com/PodCenter. Baseball Tonight, the podcast.